By the late 18th century, France was a nation resting on a fragile balance. Its society was structured into three distinct social groups known as estates. The first estate included members of the religious leadership, the second estate was composed of the noble elite, and the third estate represented the vast majority of the population: workers, farmers, merchants, and others who carried the economic weight of the country. Despite being the largest group, the third estate had little voice in political decisions and was burdened with heavy taxes, while the other two enjoyed financial privileges and significant influence. Meanwhile, the government was struggling with a deep economic crisis, the result of years of financial mismanagement, rising national debt, and costly foreign conflicts. Food prices surged, wages stagnated, and discontent spread across the countryside and the cities. These tensions created an atmosphere of uncertainty, frustration, and a growing desire for systemic change. Yet at this point, few could predict just how far-reaching that change would be, or how dramatically it would reshape not only France, but the entire course of global history. In early 1789, France's financial crisis reached a breaking point. The monarchy, led by King Louis XVI, faced the impossible task of resolving massive national debt and economic instability. To seek solutions, the king called for the Estates General, a general assembly representing the three social estates: clergy, nobility, and commoners, which had not been convened since 1614. Each estate was entitled to send representatives, but the voting system favored the first and second estates, allowing them to outvote the third estate despite its far larger population. This created frustration and a sense of injustice among the commoners. When the Estates General convened in May 1789, the Third Estate pushed for reforms, including voting by head instead of by estate, which would give them greater influence. Their demands were largely rejected, and tensions rose. Feeling sidelined, the Third Estate took a bold and unprecedented step. On June 17, 1789, they proclaimed themselves the National Assembly, declaring that they represented the true will of the French people. This act directly challenged the authority of the king and the traditional social order. Shortly after, when locked out of their meeting place, the members gathered in an indoor tennis court and took what became known as the Tennis Court Oath. They vowed not to separate until a new constitution was established, committing themselves to a fundamental change in governance. This defiance ignited a chain of events that escalated political unrest and laid the foundation for revolutionary change, signaling the decline of absolute monarchy and the rise of popular sovereignty. On July 14, 1789, an event took place that would become a powerful symbol of the French Revolution: the fall of the Bastille. The Bastille was a fortress and prison in Paris, long seen as a symbol of royal authority and oppression. Tensions in the city were running high, fueled by food shortages, rising bread prices, and fears that King Louis XVI might use military force to suppress the growing calls for reform. On that day, crowds of Parisians gathered and stormed the Bastille, seeking to seize the weapons and gunpowder stored inside. The prison was defended by a small garrison, but the overwhelming numbers of the crowd led to a violent confrontation. After several hours, the defenders surrendered, and the Bastille was taken. Although it held only a few prisoners at the time, the fall of the Bastille became a powerful symbol of the end of the king's absolute power and the rising strength of the people. News of the event spread quickly, inspiring uprisings and protests across France. Ordinary citizens formed militias to protect their neighborhoods, and peasants in rural areas began revolting against landlords and feudal obligations. This moment ignited a nationwide movement demanding political change, equality, and justice, setting the stage for the many dramatic events that would follow in the Revolution: the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. In August 1789, following months of growing political activity and social unrest, the newly formed National Assembly adopted a groundbreaking document: the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. This text outlined fundamental principles intended to guide the new French society. It proclaimed that all men are born free and equal in rights, including freedoms of speech, religion, and property. The Declaration also emphasized that the source of political power lies with the people, and that laws must reflect the general will. By establishing these ideals, the document rejected the old system of privileges based on birth or class and aimed to create a society where rights were universal and protected by law. While it set the foundation for a fairer political system, the Declaration did not resolve all tensions. Debates about its application and who truly qualified as a citizen continued. Nevertheless, it became a powerful symbol of the revolution, influencing future democratic movements around the world and marking a major shift in ideas about governance and human rights. By mid-1791, the atmosphere in France had become one of constant uncertainty. The revolutionary tide was rising fast, and with each passing week, pressure on the monarchy intensified. King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette, once the unquestioned center of royal power, now found themselves surrounded by suspicion and public hostility. Isolated within the Tuileries Palace in Paris, they had become more spectators than sovereigns, watched closely, distrusted by the National Assembly, and increasingly seen as obstacles to reform. With hope dwindling, the royal couple made a desperate decision. They would leave the capital in secret, link up with loyal troops stationed near the border, and rally support from monarchist allies abroad. Their goal, to regain control and perhaps reassert royal authority with the help of foreign intervention. On the night of June 20th, 1791, the plan was set in motion. Disguised as a servant family, the royal entourage slipped out of the city in a large, ornate carriage, far from inconspicuous, but necessary to carry the full group. For nearly 24 hours, the journey unfolded under tension, the countryside silent and watchful as the royal family crossed through towns and villages. But in the small town of Varennes, a local postmaster recognized the king from a widely circulated currency portrait. He alerted authorities, and the family's path came to an abrupt end. Soldiers stopped the carriage and detained the group, escorting them back to Paris under heavy guard. News of the failed escape spread quickly, electrifying the public and devastating what little credibility the monarchy had left. Crowds lined the streets during the royal family's return, not with cheers, but with silence and cold stares. To many, this was undeniable proof that the king could no longer be trusted, that he was willing to abandon the country in crisis to save himself. The political fallout was immediate and far-reaching. It shattered the possibility of a constitutional monarchy that many revolutionaries had still supported. Instead, voices calling for a republic grew louder, and the idea of ending the monarchy altogether gained traction. The flight to Varennes became more than just an escape attempt. It marked the irreversible breakdown of the bond between crown and country. From that point on, the road toward the abolition of the monarchy and the rise of a republic was no longer just possible. It was inevitable. With the fall of the monarchy and the establishment of the French Republic in 1792, the revolution reached a point of no return. But what lay ahead was far from stable. France was surrounded by enemies. Monarchies abroad condemned the revolution and threatened invasion, while royalist sympathizers within its borders plotted to reverse its course. Inside the country, the economy was in crisis, food was scarce, and political divisions deepened. The National Convention, now the ruling legislative body, was split between moderates like the Girondins and radicals like the Jacobins. As pressure mounted, the Jacobins, led by men like Maximilien Robespierre, gained dominance. Their message was uncompromising. To preserve the revolution, all enemies, internal or external, had to be eliminated. In 1793, the Committee of Public Safety was created and granted extraordinary powers, positioning itself as the defender of revolutionary ideals and the protector of the Republic. What followed would come to be known as the Reign of Terror, a campaign that fused justice with paranoia. The guillotine, initially introduced as a symbol of equal punishment under the law, became the centerpiece of revolutionary justice. Laws were passed that stripped away the right to proper defense and accelerated executions. The term enemy of the revolution was vague and easily manipulated, and soon anyone who criticized the government, hesitated to support a new policy, or simply appeared too wealthy or influential could be arrested. Trials were brief, evidence often circumstantial or absent, and the verdict almost always fatal. King Louis XVI was executed in January 1793, and Queen Marie Antoinette followed in October. But the blade did not stop there. Nobles, clergy, journalists, and former revolutionaries, many of whom had once supported Robespierre, found themselves accused and sentenced. Entire segments of society were silenced under the weight of suspicion. But the Reign of Terror wasn't only about executions, it reshaped daily life. Revolutionary propaganda filled the streets, churches were closed or repurposed, and citizens were encouraged to report one another in the name of liberty. Fear became a tool of control, and public loyalty became a matter of survival. Robespierre, once seen as the voice of incorruptible virtue, began to embody the very tyranny the revolution sought to destroy. In July 1794, after months of growing resistance and internal plotting, Robespierre himself was arrested and executed without trial. His fall brought the terror to an end, but the scars remained. The revolution had defended itself, but at an enormous cost. The ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity were tested against the reality of violence, fear, and political purging. In hindsight, the Reign of Terror remains one of the most complex chapters of the French Revolution, a period where justice and fear walked hand in hand, and the fight for freedom flirted dangerously with its opposite. The French Revolution left a profound and lasting impact on France and the wider world. It challenged centuries-old structures of monarchy and aristocratic privilege, promoting new ideas about equality, citizenship, and the role of government. However, the years following the revolution were marked by political instability, with various governments struggling to maintain order and meet the demands of a changing society. Amid this uncertainty, a military leader named Napoleon Bonaparte rose to prominence. By 1799, he had seized power and eventually declared himself emperor, establishing the French Empire. While Napoleon retained many of the revolution's reforms, his rule also marked a return to centralized authority and military expansion. The complex legacy of the revolution includes both the advancement of democratic principles and the realities of power struggles that shaped modern Europe. Its effects continue to be studied and debated as a pivotal moment in the history of governance and social change.